All right, coming up next is one that came from Sean. This is Trouble Man from Marvin Gaye. Take it away, Sean.
Yeah, if we're going to talk about soul or Motown, then we're going to talk about Marvin Gaye, if I'm involved at least. In fact, I'll move over so I can get out of the way of the man. Uh, you know, I've been into Marvin Gaye's music for a long time in my life, and he's just one of the artists that speaks to me. And I've said before, I don't know if you ever have these kinds of conversations at a happy hour or at a fireside when you're camping or whatever. But if you really pressed me on one artist's catalog, if I was on a stranded island and I could only listen to one artist for the rest of my life, Marvin Gaye is one of these that lands in that category for me. This album is pretty interesting because what preceded this was the What's Going On album, and that was such a massive hit in so many different ways that the record label basically gave him 100% control on this album. And so he does nearly everything. He decides everything. Marvin's playing the drums. Like that cinematic intro on the drum kit, that's him. He plays the keys, the moog. He's singing on it. He even told friends, I love this quote, I want the soundtrack to sound slick as a 1972 El Dorado, but church deep. And so it lands in an interesting place behind Pastor T.L. Barrett. And, the soundtrack part is that, the Trouble Man ends up being a movie around this time, and these songs play to the soundtrack. So I love that here's a guy that in some ways has kind of done it all musically. Like he's hit the highest highs, and now he's got full control. The record label has basically given him everything that he wants. So then you say, okay, now what does he do? Well, this is what he does. And it's just an incredible piece of art. Like the vibe in this track, it is so slick. It's confident. It's like the laid back street hustler. I didn't make it, sugar playing by the rules. Just is the smoothest line ever, probably. So I feel like there could be probably an entire podcast or more about Marvin and his life. So many interesting parts: family feuds, addiction, spirituality, quests, industry wars and fights with people in the industry, singing partners, and then the activism that he had in him. But those are topics for another day. To me, this is a moment of, at least for me, of just celebrating Marvin Gaye in his purest form with 100% control, probably being the master of the craft and sort of the ultimate artist. And this song, I think, is just what captures it for me. During this project, I went back and I probably listened to, 50 or 100 Marvin Gaye songs thinking, I know I'm going to pick one of these and which one's it going to be. And I didn't want to go with the most popular ones. And there are some songs that are a little bit more Motown that are at the beginning of his career. But it's this song, I think, that encapsulates how I feel about Marvin, probably more than anything, which is that the man was a genius. And he just had a way to speak through his falsetto and his gentleness while still bringing forth these topics that needed attention. And just to sort of see the way he brings this cinematic intro by being just such an incredible artist playing the drums in this intro. I think it's just it's kind of like the perfect composition and this encapsulation everything that's good about music, everything that's good about this era. He's just the man. 1972 song, and I feel like I don't even know what to say because I feel so deeply about this artist, and I love this song, and I have really appreciated how the last 5-6 weeks of working on this podcast has encouraged me to go deeper. And I say all these things about how much I like Marvin, and in this podcast and this playlist exercise, I've gone and I've learned a bunch of new things, and to me, that's the essence of it all. It's just respecting the genre, and you just think about how much track he lays down for people to follow, and just an important player in the big picture of music. So I wanted to bring it forth on the playlist and just see what you think. So Grant, we'll see what you think about Marvin Gaye and Trouble Man.
Yeah, I loved it. I felt like it was a shift right away from the intro. I didn't know that was him playing drums, but it just goes into kind of like a little bit more of the jazz side of things, but taking it way down. I mean, all first 5 tracks are super energetic and super joyful and super like boisterous when it comes to the song, and then we ease, like almost ooze into like the jazzy drums, and you're setting the tone. I actually didn't realize till just recently that it was a soundtrack, so kind of adding that to it and watching the trailer for that ahead of time, I was like, okay, yeah, and then to know, like you just said, that it was purposeful, like him writing this soundtrack and having like full rights to say what I want to make from I mean, we've talked about a dream job of being a music supervisor. Well, imagine like getting the assignment, make the soundtrack for this album, and somebody like Marvin Gaye to genius level piece these things together. It's ironic that Trouble Man, though, isn't necessarily known. I mean, the thematic side of the plot versus the music side of things. And I'm trying to remember when we had our movie moments, we talked about how like soundtracks being more of the story than the actual movie. And I'm drawing a blank on where that reference was, but that kind of drives to the strength, almost the overpowering nature of somebody like Marvin Gaye owning that side of things. It makes me want to go watch the movie too. And I know this song has been reused in a couple different ways, and definitely been talked about, and definitely inspired other musicians to take that cinematic role as well. He came up many times in the Bowl of Soul podcast. One of the things, the song that I had listed on there was Give a Little Love, a duet with him and Kim Weston. And it was interesting because on the Bowl of Soul podcast, the host talks about, I'm going to let you hear this version where he sings it with Mary Wells, and then I'm going to let you hear this version that he sings with Kim Weston, and we're going to compare it back to back and talk about why I like this Kim Weston version better. But I mean, that was what I thought was so cool, was the essence of who he would collaborate with, as well as the not politics, but like relationship side, or how people would pay attention of Marvin Gaye's doing this with this person, but also this person. Let's compare the two. Like, how many times in the world do you get to compare them? And the artist was like, let's put it back to back. Like, it's like if I'm saying, hey, I'm going to play the album version of A Soulful Shack, and I'm going to play the alternate version. I'll let you decide. Like, that's what she went down, and it was super fun to do that. So yeah, Marvin Gaye was somebody that absolutely defined his own kind of place in this. But he was also a community, like pulled people in as he went through that. And I think that's cool. Had a special skill to use his unique talents to bring people into movements, the civil rights movements, to just thinking about the era. And we've talked about what's going on too. Interesting that this follows that, where he has a little bit more artistic capital, or artistic free reign to do what he wants. And what you do with that. Sean, I'll just hit real briefly. You were on a flight, and you said you watched A Complete Unknown, the story of Bob Dylan that came out recently, and I watched that the other day too. And there's some parallels there of like you bring your true self to the industry, to entertainment. People accept you. What do you do next? Well, you do what you want to do next. You take what your heart puts in there. And sometimes that, like in Bob Dylan's case, met some resistance initially, but then turned into like, oh yeah, there's chapters, there's evolution, and I think this is Marvin Gaye and that evolution of the right after the what's going on thing. So I liked that a lot. I liked that it was a different sounding Marvin Gaye. It's a song, it's a soundtrack I wasn't familiar with all the Marvin Gaye influence we've heard and will continue to hear. It's nice to go left of the dial again and say, what else did he do that maybe doesn't always get the top critical acclaim when you think Marvin Gaye and his vast catalog and his vast abilities. So somebody we lost too soon too in a tragic accident, which is ironic seeing all the gunfight going on in the trailer of Trouble Man as well. But Brett, I'll throw it to you on the take on Trouble Man.
Yeah, I mean that last part that you just mentioned about Marvin Gaye's end and that tragedy definitely stood out to me in this song about just like the gravity of where he grew up and the life that he grew up with and the relationship that he had with his dad, which was very violent, reportedly throughout his entire life, as well as the tragedy of his, very public divorces. And I mean, there was just a lot of trouble that surrounded the life of the man, Marvin Gaye. And this song really seems to hit a lot of those notes. So I think that's an important thing to notice. The clever lyrics around "there's only three things," that's for sure. And he says taxes, death, and trouble, which actually goes back to Benjamin Franklin's note that there are only two things that are certain in life, which is death and taxes. I like that Marvin Gaye switches it up and says taxes, death, and trouble. And from somebody who grew up, in Black America in the 70s, in the life that he had, certainly there was trouble there. And I think that that's a part, like him nodding to a founding father of this nation and then naming that, I think is really clever. It's clever lyrics. It's a clever way to make a social commentary without it being too in your face, but like done in such a beautiful Marvin Gaye special way. Sean, your comment about can't talk about soul without talking about Marvin Gaye, and I think that that's true. I think that he is a kind of pinnacle of soul sound, and I think that there are a lot of contemporaries that are similar: Isaac Hayes, Barry White, Curtis Mayfield, Sly and the Family Stone. There's a lot of these players. I mentioned Al Green earlier, even James Brown, and Prince. A little bit later, like having this similar kind of soulful sound that they bring to it. And I think that Marvin did innovate a lot of the ways that that influenced that whole era. So again, echoing Grant on, I like that it's a more rare song. I did not know this album. I don't know this song. So again, thank you so much for introducing me to some new sounds, and it's a really great track. I dig it a ton. Good to know that he played the music on it as well, and that it's a soundtrack to a movie in that era.
Yeah, a lot of the pundits or the writers have called this the most underrated album in his catalog, and I think that it's got to be hard to write something that follows what's going on, because that was such a big hit, so much critical acclaim, covered so much ground socially and emotionally, societally. It was incredible in a lot of ways. So then what does society expect? They expect sort of what's going on to the sequel. And then that's not what you do if you're an artist with a vision. You go and do something else. And so it wasn't a big hit, and you kind of wonder how that felt for the artist. But I think the art stands for itself, and that was a big part of why I wanted to bring it forward. But also, I think I fell into that same trap, which is that the Marvin that I knew well was the popular Marvin, and this theme encouraged me to push beyond that comfort zone and go deeper into some new spaces. And so that part I really appreciate. And then also, Brett, you calling out the taxes, death, and trouble, and how it extends a 2-part, pop culture reference to a 3-part. I think it's also artful that everything's in 4/4 in this song, but then when he gets into that part, he switches into some triplet delivery, which is a little bit of a foreshadowing of how when the song breaks down later, he gets into that almost scatting level triplet delivery of several lines in a row. So I like the way that he's able to play with that a little bit and take this thing that was 2 and make it 3 and then fit it into the construct of the song, but do it in a very smooth way, just like a street hustler would.
I imagine too, and again, like the homework of going to watch the movie too, to see how the soundtrack fits that. Like if you're trying to maybe make a time signature match like the tensity or the intensity of a scene or something like that, or dialing it down. Like I wonder if something that has a new way of doing that and the evolution of the song throughout. But I don't know. I love that you point that out too. I mean, those are the time signature and the triplet changes and those kind of things that I'm glad that you always bring to the fold here, Sean. Thank you for bringing this to the fold as well, and an interesting part of Marvin Gaye's underrated side of his vast category. So let's let you listen to it. This is Trouble Man off of the soundtrack that was released. I think the single was November 1972. I don't know when the movie came out, but this is that era, 1972, which year after you were born there, Shawnee. So early on in your life, and definitely another chapter for Marvin Gaye. So here we go, Trouble Man.
There's the man.